welcome back everyone for our third session for today. I am joined by a very interesting line of panelists and moderator, introducing Mrs. Paves Dapa, the Global PR Head of Honor Hong Kong, and she's going to moderate our panel session for today. So have a good session, everyone.
Hi, everybody. A very good morning to one and all. Thanks for tuning in to our panel discussion where we're going to talk today about modern public relations for the next 45 minutes. We have amazing, inspiring ladies. Let me briefly introduce you all and then I'll hand it over them to talk more so that they can talk more about themselves. First off is Muran Mai Abrol, who is PR head of Amazon Alexa and Eco Devices India. Next up is Crystal Kung, who is communications manager at Cisco Singapore. Last not least is Selena Sheikh, head of national PR services at H&K Singapore. I am Bhavya, global PR, who is going to be moderating this panel. So Muranmai, do you want to go ahead and start talking about yourself, briefly talking about your experience and your, position right now at Amazon?
Sure. Thanks a lot for the introduction, Bhavya. Hi, everyone. I'm Rinmay Abrol, based in Bangalore, India. I've been in public relations for the last 17 years, mostly worked with technology companies. And currently at Amazon, I lead public relations for Amazon Alexa and Echo range of devices. It's been an exciting time to be in India because technology and as well as internet usage is on a rise. So we see a lot of exciting time for Alexa in coming here, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Crystal, do you want to go ahead next?
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal and I'm based in Singapore. I'm currently the head of communications for ASEAN at Cisco Systems. I have been at Cisco for about 3 years now. Before assuming this role, I was in a APJC regional role covering our cybersecurity business and our SMB business. Prior to coming into the in-house world, I was at We Communications, so in a PR agency, focusing a lot on APJC regional accounts in the tech sector, where I was mainly, I spent time with We Communications based in Singapore as well. So really looking forward to this really exciting topic today, talking about the future of PR and how it has changed since the past, today, and then in the future.
Okay, thank you. Selena, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Selena, and I lead the National PR Services Division for Hill and Knowlton Strategies in Singapore. I'm a B2B technology specialist with about 20 years of experience working with clients in this space, as well as in corporate, science, consumer tech, education, and government. So I'm also part of our regional crisis team. So we sit in the different countries across the region, and we help clients with crisis and issues management.
Amazing. Thank you guys for your amazing introduction. I'm sure everybody's in the audience will know that how inspiring the panel is. So yeah, I've crafted out some questions that we will dabble in about the future of PR in midst of pandemic. We're going to also talk about a bit of buzzword, metaverse, in general, how PR is evolving and some trends and forecasts for the coming years. If the audience has any questions, feel free to post them. We'll be happy to take them at the end of the panel. So let's just jump straight in. If you girls are ready, shall we?
Yeah.
Sure.
Cool. Okay, so my first question is public relations was once upon a time just about press releases or press kit. Now it has encompassed content creation, social media, digital innovation. So, what are the various forms of multimedia that you all are using in PR campaigns for storytelling?
I could
So, whoever
go.
wants to go first, yeah, can unmute themselves and start talking.
I can take that. I think Bhavya, again, thanks for the question. I'd just like to brief everyone why the weird background. I'm in a car right now as compared to my other panelists. Please excuse the background. I'm on my way to a Paralympic tournament, and but I didn't want to miss being part of this panel today. So just excuse that. And coming back to Bhavya, I think the question today is very pertinent to the topic of our discussion today, the modern PR. Traditionally, in PR, we used to consider only news media publications as our one and holy grail of source of reaching customers. But today, customers are getting information about brands and products that they use in everyday life through a lot of multiple channels. And I think most popular of them is social media. You can just put yourself in your place, in a day. Apart from office emails and Outlook on your laptop, how much time do you spend on social media channels like Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, and so on? And we not only get information from these social channels, but also influencers. It could be in our daily life or in our neighborhoods. So that's why PR also needs to evolve. Search, for example, whenever you are looking for something, Google search is your go-to page for collecting information. So you also need to be there in terms of ensure that the content that you're putting out about your brand is there on top of the search results. So you have to not just curate your own channels, but also use paid and earned media to reach out to their customers. So I think PR has evolved a lot from traditional media to including a mix of earned, paid, and owned media. When I say the traditional media is of course the newspapers and journalists, but then owned media is your blogs, the company blog, the company social media pages, which gives you the freedom to talk about your products and services the way you want it. You can put out videos, uh, you know ca- articles, infographics, any way you want. And then paid media where influencers and of course paid articles have come in now. Even media are now struggling a lot with their revenue model. So we have to accept that a fact that paid media is also something that you should look in seriously if you want to communicate the right message for your brand and company.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the press releases, right, have also evolved. But the one thing that remains the same for press releases is that it's still a factual piece of document. So when your major announcement goes out, it still goes out in that traditional form of a press release. But what has evolved is the things around the press release. So, like what Reme is saying, is that you're right. So I've been seeing that, yes, clients are now adding in social media content, they're putting in videos, we have sound bites. So all these add up into us being able to create or curate more interesting pictures for them. So we definitely still use the press release, but now we're using it across forms. So sometimes if I have a interesting soundbite, I can send that to one of my somebody in radio and say, hey, I have an interesting soundbite, do you want to listen to this person? Then they can come up with something, and then that can go into like a bigger interview discussion or something, but that is precede, like following your initial pitch, right? So yes, we are also using like multiple forms of storytelling. We're using social media more interactively, so you tell a bit more of the story. If your facts exist in your press release, then social media must be in a more conversational tone that takes your release slightly further. And what else do you use? You use videos, you use sound bites, all these add up. And like the other interesting thing that I like to use is also infographics. Sometimes it's harder for people to envision what you're talking about. So here's a drawing that will help you see it clearer.
So true.
Yeah, and I think if I could just add to that as well, I think the other thing to think about is also how the media pool is shrinking. So what that means is that reporters have very little time now to go through all your pictures and press releases in detail, or even more so to formulate that interesting story or not, and the interesting format of the story for their audience as well. So sometimes on top of sending a press release, like what Selena said, to contain the fact and the narrative, right? I think being able to lead them to maybe like a interactive website landing page, for example, that their readers can actually go to, or having infographics or videos that they can already use as part of their story, can also help them then tell a more interesting and more compelling stories to their readers as well.
So cool. I think that I totally agree with you, all ladies. It's PR is always, press release is always going to be the base, but it's all about how you present your stories in various visual formats. Let's go to the next question, which is very interesting. About we live in a big data world. Everybody is talking about data is money. So in the modern PR takes great advantage of big data. Can you all tell how you all are using big data to tell compelling stories, or in general target consumers or media in general? How are you using big data?
I think we are using big data. So now we have many tools to consolidate, help you consolidate and look at research across different platforms. So we have one that helps us look at news coverage and news stories, and another one we use to track influencers, right? So it's a matter of not you have to learn how to use these things and turn it into a powerful tool for your clients. So what we have, the big advantage for us is when we use big data to look at stories and stuff, we can actually pull out a bit more nuanced pictures and nuanced angles that maybe the client hasn't thought about, or maybe we haven't looked at it. We're like, this is something interesting that we can pull out, right, and make a recommendation to the client. Sometimes using big data is great. I love it because, right, it also informs the client that you are not pulling these stories out of thin air and saying, I think this will work. So it is backed by a lot of data. The same goes for consumers as well. You can take a look at data for consumers, or how influencers are influencing their own readers and their own target consumers. So I really like it.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think at Cisco, we use big data in two ways so far. I think one is very similar to what Selena said. So, really, using some of those listening tools that are available to kind of monitor the conversation bubbles that are happening, right? This could be in the media space, it can be in the social media space, it could be in forums as well. And through that, the information and the analytics, you can actually kind of map out where are the louder topics and which are the softer topics, right? And it can also help you assess what are your competitors saying more about versus what are you saying more or less about. And from there, you can use those analytics to differentiate your storyline from your competitors, but still making sure that they are according to what your audience are actually keen to hear. And I think the other way that we are using big data at Cisco is actually also through our sales tools. So we actually realized that on our sales field team side, they do have tools to help them understand their target customers better. And in all these tools that are implemented, there are actually areas that allow the target customers to indicate like, oh, what is something that they're not sure of. This could be a challenge that they're facing. It could be a topic that they're more keen to learn from. And by just adapting and adopting these insights, you can actually implement it into your PR strategies as well.
Oh, that's lovely. I think that's exactly what we do, right? When we do product launch, right? What we do is we understand the tonality. We do say, let's launch a smartphone. And after like few weeks, we gauge what tonality, what kind of features are they liking, what kind of working and what is not working. So data is really so important. We take that data from a PR point of view, give it back to the product team saying, okay, this is something that they're not liking. This is something what consumers are complaining. So yeah, data plays a very important role. Okay, next up, a part of our job, majority of our job is about pitching to media. How has the art of pitching to media changed? The new way of pitching is personalized pitches. What are you guys using tricks to get that coverage? That's important for us.
think I can take that one first. Think the art of media pitching traditionally remains the same. If you want to get your story out, you have to the publication backwards. What's going to be more relevant for the publication, and craft your pitch according to that, so that the journalist also understands the value of the messaging that you are bringing for his readers. But in today's world, journalists are more open to reaching out beyond the traditional email. So I find a lot of times we use even simple messaging platforms like WhatsApp to quickly reach out to them. And I think a lot of them are open. I think that's a very refreshing change.
Yeah, and I think I can probably add to that as well. I think at the end of the day, it goes back to identifying the story that you want to tell. And when it comes to us pitching to the media, it's always the middle of what do you want to say as a brand and what is your audience interested in listening to, right? And I think audience here, there are two prongs to it. One is the brand's audience, but the second line is also the media's audience. So you always need to make sure that that is aligned, because if you are pushing a story that the media's readers are not interested in, chances are you won't get that. And I think that personalized pitches are definitely the way to go. If you think about how it used to be traditionally press release driven, right? That's very one way. We tell the media, okay, this is what we have. The media decides that is what I want to say, and I take whatever I want to use. But now I think PR is becoming a lot more two-way. There are a lot of opportunities for us to work together with the media to formulate a story and figure out what's the best and what's the most interesting, compelling story that we can tell.
True.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, right, Crystal. So, like, this is how we've been working with media for quite a long time, especially during this pandemic times, right? It's quite because the media pools are shrinking so much. We have become a lot more creative in pitching stories to journalists, or sometimes you even have what I call your circle of trust. So you have a bunch of key journalists that you always work with, and sometimes you have the privilege of calling them. You're like, "Hey, I have this story. Do you think this will work?" And then they will be like, "Okay, no, you're crazy. This is terrible. Nobody wants it." But how I'm working on this angle instead. Do you think you have a client who can fit this angle? Does your client or does the brand are they open to say something on this? And then we're like, yeah, okay, maybe. And then we'll work around on what they need. So that's has been pretty good. I have to say WhatsApp has really helped us with the pitching. You know your journalists much better, and it's much faster for you to get your stories or ideas heard.
That's so true. I use Twitter sometimes. I just DM them.
Mm.
I've just given you the press release. Check it out. So yeah, we are evolving, right? Cool. Okay, so let's move to the next question. The modern public relations is no longer controlled by defined only by media. The game is changing with the rise of powerful social media influencers, right? And is media relationship extending to influencer relationship to you? So like when we do a lot of media relationships. So now is KOL management, influencer management getting into your roles?
I do see some of it getting into our roles. In
Okay.
especially in okay, for me, because we do a lot of B2B technology stuff, right? The KOLs are different from your regular consumer KOLs. So we are looking at people who are talking about the bigger topic at hand, not necessarily the brand itself. So we're looking at people who are influencing the conversation. What are they saying? What are they thinking about the direction of the technology? Where do they think things are going next? So it's keeping our eyes on like monitoring important KOLs for the brand, and also sometimes engaging them to talk about the brand a little bit more. Maybe not talk about the brand a bit more, but share ideas, have a coffee meeting, see where this relationship can go, maybe invite them to a panel for yourself, and then have a more in-depth discussion on what you guys can do.
Right.
Yeah, and I think this is really like an up and coming area as well. And we as PR practitioners, we have to figure out how do we work with influencers moving forward. Cisco is very B2B driven as well, right? But we have actually started working with tech influencers quite a bit in the region. I mean, if you think about the importance of media and how all this came about, we rely on the media for two main things, right? One is their credibility, and the second is their influence on the target audience that we want to reach. And if you start to think about influencers, there are influencers out there um, who meet these two criterias as well. They are credible and they do have the right influence and the right network that you can tap on. So we have been leveraging a few of them quite frequently at Cisco in, I think, largely two key ways, right? One is we have started inviting them to our media and analyst events, and some of it even involves sharing with them some news announcements under embargo so that they have the time to think about um, how can they actually share this story. I think like Selena mentioned, the way an influencer tells a story is very different from how a media publication would. So it's also important to give them that flexibility to exercise the creativity and then come back to us to let us know like, okay, what's the best way to tell this particular story, and we kind of work from there. Again, that two-way communication is very important. The other way that we have started working with influencers as well, and these are also tech influencers, is, for example, if we are launching a thought leadership report, right, we have started to include influencers as another amplification channel, to give them again that flexibility to make use of any insights from our report, and share it with with their network, and it's really open and left up to them to use it, right? If they want to just share a link to the report, for example, they can do that. If they decide to create a video instead, we will support them with that. Whichever ways they find will reach out to their audience, because at the end of the day, their objective is also to get the right engagement, to share content that is compelling. So I think that's another avenue of creativity that we should definitely leverage when it comes to storytelling.
Cool. I think we heard from
Just
B2B. Muranmai, we would love to hear from you.
yeah, echo what Selena and Crystal said. In fact, what Crystal said about how influencers have the unique way of presenting a story, I completely just resonated with me. When it comes to consumer products, of course, the tech influencers are there, but it's very important to be seen in unexpected places. I think that's a keyword uh, strategy that I always tell my team as well. Even when looking out for an agency, now I'm looking at more holistic agencies and not just people who do traditional media. So, if I take the example of echo devices, or um, you want them to be seen in everyday life situations by influencers. You know, when an influencer posts content, if the influencer, for example, is someone who dances, she's going to be using an echo device for listening to music and showcasing how she uses an Alexa to just match her dance moves with the songs and so on. If we have a mother and a young kid using Alexa at home, they're going to be showing how Alexa is playing nursery rhymes or helping with simple education related use cases. And there's someone else, a grandparent, you know, asking Alexa for devotional music. So it's in very different context. People influencers are able to show how your device is going to be more useful. I think that's the reason which very it's become very important to use influencers and not just media, because media is very restricted to news kind of articles. You know, there while there are features, a major part of their focus is to publish news items, whereas influencers give us the freedom to showcase how the devices are useful, how your technology is useful to everybody out there. So in addition, and Bhavya, you also mentioned key opinion leaders. So beyond influencers, analysts and other business stakeholders are also important. So from a PR perspective, we also now include analysts in our outreach whenever there is any kind of new announcement or a wrap up. We celebrate Alexa's anniversary every year, and we ensure that analysts get to know about what has happened in the last 1 year, how customers have engaged with her, and how the tech has what and the amount of innovation that has gone behind, and so on. Because these analysts are also being quoted in media, so it's important to keep them also updated proactively and engage with them on an ongoing basis. So definitely the scope of PR has evolved to a lot of different kinds of stakeholders. Actually, I just missed adding, even business partners are important. For example, for Alexa, we don't just use our own spokespeople to talk about how voice technology is easy and useful around the home. We use partners. For example, there are people who make Alexa skills. Um, these are like voice apps on your Alexa device. So they also talk to media about how their services are now available to customers through Alexa. So it's a great way of, you know, engaging third parties to talk about you, uh, and that's how the scope of PR has increased now. Thanks.
This is fantastic. We got such a wide, range of understanding. We understand from B2B also saying yes, influencer, management is so important that sits in PR, and how Moran may beautifully explained that it's analyst, it's coming with KOLs. We also working with TikTokers and business partners. How PR is becoming so wide. It's so interesting. It's such a good time to be in. Okay, let's jump into the next question that I have. Okay, how is important, right? Let's address the elephant in the room, which is pandemic. How has your PR strategy changed? It has been a headache for everybody, I know. So how has your PR strategy changed with the pandemic that we are living in, and which doesn't look like going away anywhere soon?
I don't know, there are several things that changed with the pandemic. One of it was we became more creative storytellers. What traditionally you think of as announcements that are like big announcements are not really as big. The media don't see it as huge announcements anymore. they are demanding that brands come up with more creative angles instead that talk to their public. So in that respect, we have had a lot more, like the creative storytelling, how we do our pitches are all changing. And also we have been also counseling clients over the last year or two, saying that, look, if you send out a press release today, chances are you will not get anything in 24 hours unless it has something to do with the pandemic. You are actually creating and releasing vaccines, or you are helping people, you are a doctor or something. Maybe that is the most important thing that the media will cover first. Otherwise, you can still get coverage, but your stories are going to come out maybe 8 to 10 days after the fact. You know, you can release your announcement today, 8 to 10 days later, the media will be like, oh, yeah, I remember this story. Tell me more. You know, I want to speak to your spokesperson. We have seen quite a lot of that happen over the last 2 years. So that has made us come back to the client saying, okay, yes, let's get all these announcements ready, but also in the background, we're prepping your spokespersons. Let's look at these other angles as well. Don't just focus on one thing.
Oh,
Yeah, I think for us, everything has become virtual, right? What used to be a press conference, what used to be a media trip, it's no longer possible now. So I think on top of being creative with pitching to media, we also need to be mindful of the experience that we are providing our journalists. So what this means is that, okay, if you have a media roundtable that is now going to be virtual, it's important to think about the experience from the time that they accept your invitation to the time they log into the platform, to the time that what do they see when they log into the platform, how engaged are they, and also being mindful of their time as well, because everybody is probably quite having this sense of fatigue, right, from all these online meetings. So I think it's important to create that special experience for them. And again, format of the content is again very important, right? This has started before the pandemic, where there is this shift to a focus on like more bite-sized content, because everybody's attention span is just going lower, like decreasing, right? So it's so important to provide content that is easily digestible, whether that is in the sense of us pitching to the media or in the sense of them sharing the story with their readers and publishing the story. But actually, now that I think of it, I think the pandemic has also brought about an advantage. And that is with this virtual environment, we have realized that there is actually an opportunities for media to get more access to more senior leadership and at a global level. And because everyone is more used to this virtual environment, right? Everyone is turning on their videos, for example. It's actually much easier to allow a journalist in Thailand, for example, to meet with the CEO of Cisco, Chuck Robbins, at a virtual setting in their preferred time zone, just because we're also used to this. Whereas previously, they may have to wait once every year when they attend like a Cisco live event, for example, to meet with him. So I think it comes with its benefits as well, but we just have to be very mindful of the fatigue and how frequently are we engaging with our journalists.
yeah. Do we have Murunwai still here? Oh, we lost her. Okay, no worries. I think once we get her back, we'll probably hear her thoughts. But yeah, I think I echo the same thing that you all said. There are pros and cons to it. Like we used to always be like running around doing launch events after every like second month, and it is so exhausting for the media guys. Now they are like, oh, we can just log in, attend your briefing, attend your launch event, and just give you coverage. So become more efficient, and of course, we have been able to like be more productive, and it's less draining to my entire team. And again, when it comes to like we've done a hybrid mode where we do okay globally. What HQ level does is we have our CEO who comes and talks about the product, and locally our local PR teams do like intimate gathering. So we try to incorporate hybrid mode in most of our launches. Cool. So yeah, I think we are heading to two more questions. The next question that I have is, what's one PR trend that you can forecast in 2022?
Well, I'm happy to go first. I think
Okay.
for me, I think social media is going to be so much more integrated into traditional PR than ever before. And I think storytelling is going to be the key to that. And PR, digital marketing, and traditional marketing will really have to work together. They have to be intertwined in-house as well as at the agency level to really bring this story to life. I think it's something that everyone everywhere has been trying to touch and feel and figure out what this means. But I think in 2022 and beyond, people need to nail it because that's the only way. You need that 360 touch to really deliver a message.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that because over the last year we have an integrated PR team as well. So what we've seen is that when you combine, like what Muramai said at first, right? When you combine paid with traditional PR, it actually becomes even more powerful because traditional PR does one thing, but when you do the paid platform, you actually have the right, not the right, you have the ability to change your message and also adapt it as you go along. So it's not just one message. If you find that one message doesn't work, you can tweak it, immediately put it out again. And then you'll see your audience levels and all that. That will change. And then you see whether there's engagement. So I think, yeah, that is the way forward. It's a combination of both. But I also don't see that one of it will drop off. Will one be more important than the other one? No. I think all of these have to work together. I've seen over the last couple of years also that people are trying to launch podcasts, and podcasts, I really like that platform. That's a very interesting platform, but some some storytellers are not as good, and I think that even when you are doing podcasts, you need to have a platform or a story, right, that resonates with the speaker as well as with your brand. How are these two coming together to push that story forward? And the story has to be compelling. If we are just in a room talking about how great my product is, that's not going to work. It has to work for a wider level. How does it affect your target consumers or like your KOLs? How does it affect people? What can it bring to your table and change your life that way? So I think in terms of storytelling, right, that is very important still. And things like podcasts and all, yes, it will still continue to gain traction over the next year, but you have to combine it with an integrated platform so that it amplifies and it can move on its own. Because sometimes we see clients that only do, okay, I'm going to launch a podcast, and they come back, they're like, yeah, but nothing happened, only 10 people engaged with it. They're like, yes, but did you do your socials? Is it on your socials? Is it on your speaker socials? Did you put some, like, a bit of oomph into it and put some integrated stuff into it? Did you engage it on other channels? So it's like we have to think a bit wider from our boxes now.
Yeah, perfect. I think I totally agree. I think one of the trends that I can forecast is, oh, by the way, Clubhouse. Remember, Clubhouse was so hyped up like this year. I don't know where it is going, but then Twitter Space is coming up, and it's such a good conversation starter. Right?
Mm,
You just like pull in people where everybody's out there and sharing an opinion about something that you want to talk. And I
yeah.
think voice is going to be very powerful. I wish Muranmai would have been here, but she should understand, and she
Mm,
knows very that voice and video is becoming so powerful. Like nobody has time to read. If you go to Wall Street, I prefer reading, like somebody reading out the story for me. So those kind of stuff. How do you empower quick messaging? Like your story can be conveyed in few minutes. That is more powerful. Like they have people have no time at all. As Crystal said, the attention span is so short. If you can convey that and tell how you're going to solve a certain particular problem in a smarter way, PR will win in a long game. Cool. We're going to come to the last question. We have one audience question. Audience, you have still some time. We have some time for like 5 minutes. If you have any questions, don't forget to like put that in the Q&A section. My last question is something that everybody's talking about, the buzzword metaverse. How do you see modern PR embracing metaverse? Any kind of prediction, anything that you guys have seen that's exciting for you? And what do you think is going to happen? Is PR going to get into metaverse and find or create a way to get your storytelling out there?
I have to confess, when it comes to the metaverse, it's something that we all have to learn first. I think it's true because when these things come out immediately, right? Your PR person is the first one you turn to and you go, "Hey, how do I use these things? You are supposed to be the expert. You are supposed to tell me." But as
Yeah.
PR practitioners, I recommend that we all go out and learn as much as we can on this. This is like the first time we heard the words social media. And like, yeah, and integrated PR. So I think metaverse is something that we are already working in. It's just a matter of refining the tactics or refining your approach to the metaverse to see how you can actually work with this. It doesn't mean that if you're not in it, you can't. It's you finding yet another angle or another approach into making the metaverse work for you and your brand.
Yep,
Yeah,
agreed.
I definitely agree with that. I think when I first saw your question, I was like, oh wow, that is very interesting. That's a very interesting question for the PR world. And really like what Selena said, right? It's probably another era, like the social media era that we kind of need to figure out. And I guess we can think about it as it's another channel, potential channel for us to reach our target audience, right? PR is always about being where our audience are. So it really depends on how this rolls out. If the metaverse is where a lot of our audience are going to be, I don't see why PR shouldn't be involved in that. I'm sure you all have seen the news as well, right? How Nike has also immediately started filing for their logos and patents on their logos in the virtual world. And actually, it got me thinking about how Animal Crossing was during like 2020 during the lockdown period, right? Where the game has been around for a while, but because everyone was stuck at home, they started playing Animal Crossing so much more, and brands started being on it, right? Like for example, I think KFC in the Philippines, they did something in Animal Crossing. Sentosa, which is an island in Singapore as well, they did something to get people to kind of virtually travel around. I think even for Fashion Week, for example, there are brands like Valentino who release their new looks on Animal Crossing itself, so that people can almost kind of like put on the new looks for free, right? In that sense. So I think there's definitely a lot of creativity that can go into that. And that's only going to make PR a lot more exciting. And you can argue whether, okay, is that marketing? Is that branding? Is that PR? The answer is we don't know. I think going back to the trend that we talked about, right? These functions have to work together. And it's only when they start working together, then we can figure out, okay, if our end objective is still to increase brand awareness and brand recognition, what are the channels that are going to help us achieve that, and what are the functions that need to come together? So I'm certainly excited for what's to come, because it just means that we're just going to have to be so much more creative, and there's a lot of room for us to be more creative in that sense.
Fantastic. I totally agree with you too, ladies. Because this is just one more channel and this gives us more scope to be more creative and more crazy. And I think I'll just share one great campaign that we did for our product launch Honor 50. We always have celebrities, right? You'll always see like iPhone, Samsung having like celebrities to endorse their phone. This time, what we did is we tied up with a virtual KOL called Noori. She's very popular in China. Prada works with her, Chanel works with her. So we decided to work with her and say, okay, how are you going to take the phone and create a video in where you take the phone and capture the virtual world of yours. So we did a very beautiful video. Media kind of liked it. It took a lot of time to create that video with the virtual KOL, but it was fantastic because what outfit? How do we put that in the software version of our phone? So yeah, it's fascinating how wider can we go with metaverse. Interesting. With that, we come to the end of the panel. We have one interesting question from our audience. Nibhar, some PR manager of CVS, has a question to the panel. Says big data was covered, but what do you think of using AI to automate channels? Is it as impactful for us in PR?
I think yes and no. I certainly think there are areas of PR that could potentially be automated by AI. But I think when you think about the art of storytelling and the art of crafting a story, um, I think at this point you still need to work together. You still need to think through it. You still need to bounce ideas off people, and you just need to relate it in so many different factors, right? What the media is interested in, what's happening in the current climate, and all these are still very much based on human interactions right now. So I think there are aspects that can be automated, but I think the art of storytelling and idea generation, that still has to be like driven from human interactions. Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I also agree with that. It has to, I think you can teach the machine how to write a press release. I think in a couple of years, it may have enough capability to write a press release, but definitely the story curation and all has to come from a human point of view. Because I would love to I really, if the machine can write my press releases and all, I will be the happiest person in this world. But we still need to, when it comes to nuance, that's a bit more difficult. And that is something that has to be done by a person who's looked at the research, who's looked at, competitive share of voice and all, and then put everything together. It's still a person's job right now.
I love that question. I totally agree.
Mm,
I mean, we all have this fear. What is going to AI going to do? But I think AI is still going to lack when it comes to creative storytelling, and
right.
that's where you still need human touch, and that's where PR comes in very strong. Yeah, AI can actually maybe optimize our press release, maybe can do data analytics and everything, but at the end of the day, it needs human mind and human touch. So yeah. So there is still a lot of hope and a lot of creativity out there that folks like us can bring in the change.
Mm.
So yeah, if you have any more questions, let us know. If not, I think we're almost at the end of the session.
It would be
So
cool if the one thing that AI cannot do, which is quite funny to me, I think, is it cannot speak to reporters. Can you imagine if the reporters had to go through an AI bot to get their questions answered? I'll be like, delete immediately and run away.
I love this question totally. I don't know why I didn't think of it, but I'm glad our audience did that.
Yeah.
And it just made me think, I just thought the panel is coming to an end, but I have so many questions now. But then we can't go ahead. And I loved conversating, having a conversation with you lovely ladies. I hope the pandemic comes to an end. I can meet you girls and
Yes.
we can do a live session next year maybe,
Yeah,
hopefully.
that would be fun.
Yeah. Okay, so I think with that we come to an end of the session. Sarah, do you want to take over?
Hi, I'm back. Okay, thank you so much for the lovely session. That was really great. I'm sure everyone has covered a lot of topics that probably in our audience's mind, and I hope the audience gained a lot of value add from it. Thank you so much for joining me today and spending your time with the audience. I hope you all have a lovely end of the year holiday and that we, like Bobby mentioned, we could actually meet in person next year. Should I have any related events?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. We're actually gonna go with the next session with Bhavya. So I hope everyone can stay and enjoy the session. See
Yep.
you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.